So my name is Hayley, and I work. I'm one of the directors of Past Participate. Um, this morning we're going to go through recording Sarsen stones. So I hope some of you have got a bit of a background. You know where the Valley of Stones is. You might know something about Sarsen stones. You might not know where the Valley of Stones is. You might know nothing about Sarsen stones. You might know nothing about archaeology and nothing about geology, and that's fine. This slightly bonkers project will go through everything, so that by the end of it, hopefully you feel that you can become a part of our bigger recording project, and part of our bigger research. So I'm going to try and share my screen. I should warn you, as I share my screen, I lose the ability to see you. So if you, and I lose the ability to see the chat. So if you want to me to stop, to repeat something, oh, for the first time ever I can see you now I've done this. I'll stop. So what I was saying, anyway, feel free to ask questions, jump in, stop me, ask me to backtrack, especially since there's only a few of us. I'd hope that this session will, well, I want it to be as useful as it can be for you. So the first half of the presentation, I'm going to go over who I am, who we are, what the Sarsen Survey project is, and a bit of the sort of the background, the archaeology, why we're doing this, all that sort of thing. And then the second half, we'll look at the field survey and the data collection. So if you decide you want to be part of this, what do you do and how do you do it? You have to excuse my cough that's been lingering for weeks. So who are we? Past Participate Community Interest Company is who we are. As I said earlier, I'm Hayley. The managing director of the company is Anne Tether, and the photo on the screen is myself and Anne and Jim, who used to be our third director, but who resigned last year. Our current sort of big project is Living Among the Sarsens. This is a 5-year project funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and it's based around the Valley of Stones, near sort of Little Bredy, Abbotsbury in Dorset. So although the focus is the Valley of Stones, we do look at the landscape a bit beyond that as well, because although that's got a modern boundary around it, in the past, boundaries don't reflect modern boundaries. So as archaeologists, we find it very hard to stick to modern boundaries, and hopefully you'll see why that is as we go forward. So the project aims of Living Amongst the Sarsens is to learn more about the Valley of Stones, and then to share this knowledge. We don't believe in just going out and doing some research and not telling anyone. We place a strong emphasis on engaging people and working with people to gather the research and to learn the knowledge, and then to share it as well with people that can't get involved in the data collection. And we have a secondary aim to improve well-being. The Valley of Stones is a beautiful place. Lots of people seem to really enjoy doing archaeological research. We work as part of a team. All these things are known for helping people have a good time, and improving well-being. We do a lot of data collection on well-being, or we're trying to. Those of you who've worked with me before will know that I ask you to fill out lots of forms all the time about how you're feeling. So just, if you don't want to be involved in that side of things, that's absolutely fine. Just let me know. If you're bored of filling in forms, just say so. If you don't, some people don't want to tell me, that's also absolutely fine. But just to warn you, that is one of our aims, is to make people feel happier and to have a good time. And of course, because we said we want to do this, we then have to prove that we can do it for the funders. And the only way we can do that is by asking you how you feel. So the Valley of Stones. Mel, have you been to the Valley of Stones before?
Oh, numerous times, yes.
Okay, and Ian and Melanie, I think from what I recall, you signed up for our. Did you sign up for our guided walk?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I know Ian knows the landscape in the area reasonably well. So you know where it is on the map anyway. The site is a triple SI and a national nature reserve. So ecologically, it's really interesting and really important. There is some significant geological interest there, which is a sort of national interest too, which are the Sarsen stones. And it's also a scheduled monument. And what these things together mean is that it's got a high level of protection. So you can't go and just dig a hole in the Valley of Stones because it looks interesting. The scheduled monument protection means that it's just illegal to do that. Natural England manage the nature reserve, and they manage it in accordance with all of those restrictions. And it's beautiful, and it means that it's well looked after. Although those protections do also give us some hiccups when we want to do our own research. You know, we're not exempt. We have to apply for permissions to do things as well. The Sarsen stones are a natural geological phenomenon. So you can see them in the picture there. They're sort of scattered across the landscape, mostly in the base of the valley, but not entirely, as you will see. But these stones have been used throughout time. I'm going to go over some examples in a minute. And it's that the stones that have been used by people that we're interested in as archaeologists. It's the people that matter to us. Although slowly all of us seem to be finding that we're getting more and more interested in the geology as well. This is a picture of the polissoir. Again, I'll talk to you a bit more about it in a bit, but it's a Neolithic polishing stone, and it's the artifact that basically sort of kick-started this whole project. It's an incredibly rare artifact from the Neolithic. There are only two that are comparable in England. And obviously the Sarsen stone there is integral to that artifact. So we found the polissoir actually as a result of looking at Sarsen stones elsewhere. Now you might think, why on earth would we want to bother conducting a Sarsen survey? You know, can't we just wander around and see what the stones look like and find it interesting, and see what interesting things we can find? And the answer is no. We want to do this systematically. And actually, we started because we wanted to ascertain the occurrence and distribution of sarsen in the Valley of Stones and in the wider landscape. The very first survey we did was way back in 2019 up on Tennant's Hill, which is where the Kingston Russell Stone Circle is. I think I've got a map of that coming up in a bit. I'll show you. And we were looking at the prehistoric monuments that were up there and trying to think about where those stones had come from. The obvious answer was that they'd come from the Valley of Stones, but we weren't 100% sure. So by doing the Sarsen survey up there, we had slightly different questions we were investigating. But it set a precedent and a method and a way of working for us. In the Valley of Stones. So in the valley, we're looking to see how the stones are distributed, where, so by that I mean where they occur. I alluded earlier that they're all, well, they're not all on the bottom, although it does appear that most of them are. And we are seeing patterns sort of emerging and coming to light. We're interested in looking at how the stones have been used by people in the past. So we're looking for or we found the polissoir. We're looking for evidence of quarrying. We've also identified that we think they were moving the stones around in prehistory when they were creating fields. And there are other interesting results that are coming out as well. And then we want to look at how this data sort of can provide insights into the bigger picture, the bigger landscape. So the prehistoric monuments, for example, the Grey Mare and her cults, or some of the stone circles that are nearby, do they look like they're the same types of stone? Have they definitely come from the Valley of Stones? Could they have come from elsewhere? Portisham has its own sort of natural Sarsen stone field. So we're doing this research at the moment, very much focused on the valley, and then that will allow us to think about the bigger picture. But we haven't quite got any answers yet to that bigger picture. And actually, we're only partway through getting the answers to what we're finding in the Valley of Stones. Sarsen stones were recorded in the 1970s. There was sort of an early example of citizen science where interested people went out and looked all across Dorset, Hampshire, and Wiltshire at the Sarsen stones they could find. They produced some great records of what they were finding, and they did come and look at the Valley of Stones, as you can see on that sort of hand-drawn map there. But there were problems with the original work that they did. So although it was in the 70s, their recording was fairly high standard. There's no problems with that. But they did focus mostly upon the bigger stones. Because they were interested in the Sarsens and they were thinking about the prehistoric monuments. The prehistoric monuments tended to use the bigger stones. So as a result, this Sarsen survey just looked at the bigger stones. We are taking it one step further, and we're interested as much in the small stones as we are in the big stones. Our reasons for that are in 2019, we surveyed the Sarsen stones on Tennant's Hill, and we were deliberately looking for the smaller stones. So let me just see if I can get my mouse up. Where's it gone? Here we go. So just to give you some reference on this aerial photo, which I hope you can all make out. The Valley of Stones is just off here. For those of you who know Galwell Farm, this is Galwell Farm here. This is the drive down to Galwell Farm. The Grey Mare and her cults burial monument is here, and the Kingston Russell Stone Circle is up here. So we sent volunteers out looking for Sarsen stones. At the time, we were all quite new to this experience, and so they recorded all the stones they could find, and they were looking. It wasn't quite all the stones all the stones that they thought might be Sarsen. And they were looking primarily in hedgerows, because in this bit of the landscape, a lot of the stones had been cleared out of the fields by farmers so that they could, the fields can be ploughed. So they went out in similar time of year to now, when all the nettles had died down, all the brambles had lost their leaves, so that they could see what they could find. And as you can see, if you look at the red dots, the Sarsens are sort of fairly clearly distributed in the sort of eastern side of that map. And just to prove that they did look elsewhere, I've left the other stones on further across to the west. And it's particularly interesting that this Kingston Russell Stone Circle up here is the farthest west of where we found the Sarsen stones. Now, this helps us start to understand where the natural geological distribution of Sarsen stones might be. When we're looking, that photo I showed with the Valley of Stones, with all the big stones, they're big, they're obvious. The prehistoric monuments, they are made of big, obvious stones. If you want to build a monument, it makes sense to carry up your big stones. And so therefore we can see them in the landscape, we can see where people have moved them around. But this survey proved that there were also smaller stones that were up on the hilltop.
Haley, can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course you can.
You kind of jumped straight in. I mean, I know a little bit about the geology of this area, and I didn't think that Sarsens were kind of naturally occurring geologically. And if I'm wrong, then that's good to set me right. If I'm right, then how the hell have they got here?
Great question. I will come on to that in a little bit. I've got some slides to kind of go over the background, because they are naturally occurring, but it's tricky because geologists seem to bicker a little bit over their history, and they don't fit into any of the categories of stone that you get talked about at school. And there's a lot of kind of assumptions people make about Sarsen. Sort of, the whole name Sarsen means, foreign, come from somewhere else. And that's not actually completely true. So I'll come on to that in a bit. But for now, you'll sort of have to take my word for it that the Sarsens in the Valley of Stones are naturally there. But you can see where all these little red dots are. They are also, they're small Sarsen stones. Nobody in their right mind is going to bother filling up a basket full of small stones and carry them up the hill. So we think that there may well have been a distribution of bigger Sarsen stones on the tops of the hills as well, which may be where they got the stones for the monuments from, or it may still not be. We can't prove one way or the other at the moment. So that was sort of the first survey that we did. And this is a map of the Valley of Stones. And this is what we've done in the Valley of Stones so far. Last year, we recorded 538 stones, I think. This year so far, this season, I've handed out sheets for about another 500 stones that people are working their way through. So this map here, you can see all these little blue dots. These are the Sarsen stones we recorded last year. All those black dots, the ones we've still got to do. There's quite a lot there. There is about 1,500 in total. And when you bear in mind that the Sarsen survey that was done in the 1970s recorded 900 in total across Dorset, Wiltshire and Hampshire, we're doing this in quite a lot of detail, and we're looking at the much smaller stones. And it is proving to be really very interesting. This is Andy standing up against one of the stones. He was out last year. We're finding really big stones. We're finding really small stones. And just in the last couple of weeks, so I haven't actually had a chance to extract any of the photos that people have been sending me and get them into this presentation. But we've been finding lots of stones that have been split, probably in the 18th, 19th century. They've been split for quarrying. And again, I'll talk a bit more about how you identify that in a minute. But this project is ongoing and evolving. And week to week, we're finding out new things all the time. And it's working. So although it seems completely bonkers to wander around a valley and fill out bits of paper about stones and to try and record 1,500 of them, we are getting there. It's working really well. People seem to be enjoying it, despite it being a bit cold and wet on occasion. And archaeologically, it's proving quite valuable. So does anyone have any questions on that sort of background bit for now, before I move on to talking a bit more about what Sarsen is?
Can I ask where the source data is for the distribution of Sarsens? The maps.
Do you mean this map here?
I think you sent us some maps showing an outline of every stone that you need surveyed. I just wondered where that data's originated. Is it remote sensing, LiDAR? I just wondered.
It's a combination of things. So one of our project partners, who I haven't really mentioned yet, is Historic England. And they, as part of our much bigger project, have done an aerial survey of the Valley of Stones, and they've recorded, I think LiDAR was one form of data that they used, but they used lots of aerial photographs, and they even commissioned their own aircraft to fly over. And so they have drawn as many stones as they could see on that aerial, from that aerial data.
Okay.
We have also been heading out ourselves and recording our own mapping. So we've got our own it's called a GNSS, like a high accuracy GPS, where we've been plotting our maps, because we've also been finding that the maps that we're giving you, and basically the maps that, if you do want to do this yourselves, I allocate everybody an area so that we've not got sort of like people repeating the same places, and all of that data will be like a zoomed in version of what you can see on the screen now.
Okay.
And we're finding that when people are out there, they're also finding stones in addition to what's on the maps.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for sure there are stones which aren't on your map because they're under a tree or a scrub canopy on the slopes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there are issues with under trees. It appears to be in some areas the grass must have been quite long, so they've not come up. So yeah, we're very much about filling in the gaps. This is sort of like a very multi-layered approach. The figure of 1,500 stones has come from what Historic England recorded, and it was a nice round number to start with, but I can see that being added to significantly. Last year, I think we only added maybe 30 stones in the areas that we did, but this year already, I mean, some people are joking with me that I send them out to record 10 and they come back with 20 pieces of paper and 20 record sheets. So different areas, it's obviously just a bit patchy, but that's partly why it's so important to have people actually on the ground, and I'll explain in a bit how we're recording that and how we are making sure that all that data becomes accurate. And I'm actually heading out to the Valley of Stones tomorrow to learn how to use the GPS myself. So I'm going to be doing some Sarsen surveying in the morning, and then later on a colleague of mine is coming out to teach me how to use the GPS, because it's so much work trying to record the stones that we're missing. She was just doing it all, but she doesn't have time to do it all of herself now. We're finding so many. So I'm going out there to learn it as well. And then it should be a really, really high quality, really comprehensive data set when we're done.
Because in Natural England have drone footage as well in the last couple of years. So we've used their drone footage. We've also had Bournemouth University do a multispectral survey, where it was an experimental method that they tried, but they wanted to try and see whether we could spot where stones were beneath the surface. Or where, because what we can only record the stones that we can see above the surface, but it's really obvious that that's not the whole stone. And that's just something we have to accept as a limitation of what we can do. But we hoped that the multispectral survey would give us an indication, if we could measure a stone that was, I don't know, a meter across, could we then see, was there 20 more centimeters beneath the soil? But they haven't actually given us that data back yet. So when we
this is very much ongoing research, and it's very sort of multifaceted and quite complex. And I will always update everybody as much as I can with as much as I know. But it's often, I don't know what we're going to come up with. And goodness knows how many stones we're going to have by the end of it. We'll have to see.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions so far? Okay, I will move on to what is Sarsen. So here it makes it sound very simple. Sarsen is a silcrete sandstone formed by the surface or near surface acidification of quartz, sand, and gravels. Well, it's not actually that simple. Lots of complicated words in there, and it's a bit of a tongue twister at the best of times. It was formed in the sort of Paleocene, Eocene thermal maximum around 55 million years ago. As an archaeologist, that's fairly meaningless to me. It was a really long time ago, 55 million years. And basically, what happened? For those of you that know the landscape, if you know where sort of Harley's Monument, you can see it in the picture here. Beneath it is a deposit of sands and gravels. These are called the bag shot beds. They sort of occur across bits of Dorset on the tops of the hills, particularly in this landscape and Bedminster Down. And they are the result of wolfterine deposits. So basically there was a great big river, and the river was moving through the landscape, and at points rivers deposit big stones. When they're faster flowing, when they're slower flowing, they will deposit sands. This happened over a long period of time, and the deposits built up somewhere between sort of 4 to 10 meters thick, and these deposits were being put on top of the chalk. So underneath everything is a geological layer of chalk, and on top you get these sands and gravels that this river is depositing across. At the same time, you've got quite a lot of plants growing in this environment, and it's quite a warm environment, and the plants are silica rich. That silica is essential to forming the Sarsen stones. So over time, it was hot, it was wet, that silica basically hardened, and the sands and gravels became stuck together and formed this layer of hard sands and gravels basically. But this occurred in quite a patchy way, because the sands and gravels were not deposited uniformly. The silica was not deposited uniformly. So what this results in basically is these sort of boulders of hard sands and gravels that are stuck together. So that is very much an archaeologist's explanation of your geological process. So you have to just sort of continue to take my word for that for now. And hopefully, as we go through, you'll start to, when I show you some more pictures of the stones, and if you go out onto site, when you start to look at the stones, you'll realise these sands and gravels. And you'll be able to start to see them in the stones. And then, of course, what happened in more recent times is that the stones have then sort of moved around. They're no longer in this sort of layer. They've slipped down into the valleys. They've moved around a bit. But that is where geologists seem to disagree slightly on how did the Sarsens, they started, you know, on this nice sort of level area where this river was, and now they're at the bottom of the valley. They must have slipped down somehow, but I struggle to understand how that movement has occurred. And I think the reason I struggle to understand it is because every person I speak to gives me a slightly different explanation. So it also means that Sarsen stone is not a uniform type of rock. It's really hard and really dense, and there are three main types. So you've got the saccharoid sarsen, which is made up of sand grains, and it looks like sugar. Sorry, did someone have a question there?
No,
well, it was just to say that the Valley of Stones is really special because most of the Sarsens are in situ, or at least presumed to be in situ, which is pretty unusual because most Sarsens in the landscape will have been moved elsewhere. So I think that's why geologists find it so interesting. It's known as a train of Sarsens.
Yes, but I think they have still moved. So they've been where they are for a very long time.
Yes.
But there still seems to be some disagreement over, because we've got, when we went out into the Tennant's Hill wider landscape and we found the smaller stones up on the top, it definitely indicates that there is some natural tendencies, or that, you know, there was some geological, let me start again, that on the tops of the hills, there used to be sarsen on the tops of the hills as well. And now it appears to be that they're all pretty much located in the bottom of the Valley of Stones, apart from those where we can see that people have moved them, whether in prehistory or later. But they have definitely been in the Valley of Stones in that sort of, I mean, we are referring to it as a natural train for a very long time. They definitely have naturally ended up there, but at what point or what geological forces put them exactly where they are is unclear. There's definitely been some slipping down the hillsides at points.
Yeah, there is natural movement, and you can see that happening on the green side. Yeah.
And in fact, we excavated around the Polissoir site, and a bit of a story here, but we had to excavate under some very strict conditions that Historic England had set us, and we were supposed to excavate in 20 centimetre squares, which seemed like a great theory and is good practice for when you're working in easy soils. But as soon as we took the grass off the top, we found nothing but stone. Which meant we basically had to stop excavating because we couldn't excavate in 20 centimetre squares because it just doesn't work when you've got a stone that's bigger than 20 centimetres. And so there is definitely a depth of stone there as things have naturally moved around. And I was also kind of hoping that the Bournemouth University Multispectral Survey might give us an indication of how deep that is and how far up the sides of the valley it comes, and whether that gives us an indication of slippage and movement. We've also discussed doing some geophysical surveys to try and look at the deposits under the ground, but we've yet to actually come up with a satisfactory method that we think would give us the answers that we need. So we haven't done that yet.
Okay.
So the saccharoid sarsen, as I said, it looks like sugar when it's freshly broken. You'll find when you go out to the Valley of Stones that hopefully you don't see any stones that's freshly broken, because they've all been there for a very long time. And we are absolutely not damaging the stones in any way, shape or form. But in an ideal world, that's what a geologist would do, is they would chip a bit off and then they could look at it in detail. You also get this sort of quartzite, which is a particularly hard sarsen. It's finer grained, and it's sort of a darker grey-brown in colour. And then you get what we call the conglomeratic Sarsens. It's also known as pudding stone, and it's when you get these flint pebbles that are fixed and set in this sand matrix. So to jump from the geology to the archaeology, how and why have these stones been used? They've been used in the prehistoric monuments. So this picture, where is my mouse? Okay, on the left is actually Avebury, so it's not in our particular landscape, but the Stonehenge and the Avebury landscapes are really quite comparable to the Valley of Stones. And the South Dorset Ridgeway, we're seeing very similar monument types, seeing similar sort of trends across the landscape, including the use of sarsen. So this one up here, this is the grey mare and her colts. You can kind of make out here that this is conglomerate sarsen. Actually, you can see that it's made up of these pebbles. This is the Kingston Russell Stone Circle, and of course this over here is Stonehenge. So in prehistory, people built their monuments in this particular bit of landscape out of sarsen stones. They built similar monuments elsewhere out of different stones, and out of wood as well. So the monuments themselves are not unique to the area, but the fact that they have used the sarsen stone is because it was there, and it was important to them to use it when it was there. There's lots of discussion to be had about how they move the stones around. Do you stick them on rollers? Do they just pull them, which I think is the most likely, sliding them across the grass? But the sarsen itself in these monuments is usually, it appears to be carefully selected. They're not just going willy-nilly and finding the closest stone or the easiest bit of stone they can find. They are carefully selecting the stones to build their monuments. The grey mare and her colts is a long barrow. It's a Neolithic long barrow. Basically, that means it was a burial chamber. And then the stone circles, probably a little bit later in date. Stone circles are still fairly enigmatic monuments. Probably have some kind of sort of burial ritual purposes, along with use of calendars and time telling, and I mean there's all sorts of interpretations over stone circles. We've also found the polissoir, which I showed you the photo of earlier. This is actually the same slide that we used back in 2019, when we were saying to people, off you go out into the landscape, see what you can find. These are sort of general things that sarsen stones are used for. And actually, my colleague Anne said, if you find a polissoir, we'll buy you a bottle of whiskey. And of course, that is eventually what happened. But it was so unusual and so unexpected that that's how we were, we were joking about it in the first place. You can see down on the bottom corner here, that's a rotary quern. So it would have been used for grinding grain. And sarsen's great for that, because it's really hard. In more recent times, sarsen makes a really great building material. This is a lovely dovecot over at Avebury. All these stones here are sarsen. But closer to home, lots of the buildings in Portisham have got lumps of sarsen in them, whether like this huge one that makes up part of the wall. Some of the houses have got the bigger stones used as foundations, but also they have used some cut and shaped stones in Abbotsbury here for the curbstones. I mean, what a good way to protect your pavements and to define your road by using the hardest stone you've got just around the corner. So that is, in summary, sort of a quick summary of Sarsen stones and archaeology and geology and all mixed in. I'm just going to come out of that and stop showing my screen for a second, just so I can see you all. I'm very aware that that's quite a lot of information, quite a general background behind why we're doing this project. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions on any of that at the present moment? No. Okay. In that case, I think. Oh, Ian, you.
Yes. So, what are you hoping? If geological, what are you hoping to find then?
Sorry, if it's geological.
If it's geological.
Well, we're hoping to find evidence of where people have been using the stones. So we, in the last couple of weeks, we've been finding lots of examples of sort of 18th and 19th century quarrying of the Sarsen. So we're finding stones that have got straight edges where they've been split in the past. The next section of the presentation will show you a few examples of that. We would love to dream and find examples of where the stones were split in prehistory, where we're finding, and this is again where it's really quite helpful to have people on the ground looking at the distribution. In fact, if I just go back to the distribution map and share my screen again with you. And they're going to come up. Can you see that now? Yes. Why can I not see that? Right, there we go. So can you see here how we've got this natural Sarsen, that we've got this train, this sort of really high density, a high density of Sarsen stones. This is the bottom of the valley, but you can see they're scattered up the field, up the side of the field here. And when you're out on site, you realise that that's the sides of the valley. But there's a really strong line here where they end. And we think that coincides with where they've been clearing the field. So there's a prehistoric field system that stretches all across the landscape here and beyond the Valley of Stones. And we think that as part of their creation of that field system, so the fields are defined by some sort of ditches and banks. But if you want to plant things, or you want to graze animals, you don't want great big stones in the way. And so they would move them to the edges. And we think over here, this is quite a strong line, basically where they've moved a lot of the stones from here over to here. And we think that was definitely happening in prehistory. But it's also an indication that we're missing quite a lot of stones, that were up here. One of the questions we're wondering is, are they underneath the banks of the ditches that are there that make up this prehistoric system? Actually, have they been taken away in more recent times? Were they more easy to sort of access up here? You can see there's a scattering on this side as well. This is a slightly, the hillsides, they vary in their steepness. Have the stones just been more likely to slide down there, or have they disappeared as well? By actually having people out on the ground looking for these things, it's really sort of helping us to understand how the landscape itself was used. And by the end of this, when we can combine this with the mapping work that Historic England have been doing on those fields, we should have a really interesting data set that can teach us about landscape use in prehistory, basically. So there's quite a few different things. There's also, I don't know if you can see this dot up here. That's a slightly random one. Why is there one stone up the top there. And I can tell you that in last summer, we actually were excavating in that general area. We're excavating a brickworks, which is sort of here. But we also had a quick look at this stone because it seemed to be unusual. And we do think it was a standing stone. So we've got some more research to do on it still. We want to go back and excavate a bit more. But we do think that in prehistory, that stone used to be upright. I have a current working theory that in the summertime, when the sun rises in the sort of east, was it some, anyway, what I did was I went back and I looked online, and you can find various websites and things that look at where shadows of stones fall. And basically, when you're up here, I think it was at midsummer, the shadow of the stone points in this direction. It sort of points northeast, and it points down to exactly where the polissoir is. Now, standing stones are known to be quite common from prehistory. There's also a standing stone up at the top of the drive down to Galwell, so sort of just off the map, just down here. Were these markers in the landscape? Actually, we would never have found that and never have started asking this question if we hadn't been conducting the Sarsen survey. There are a couple of other odd ones scattered around. There's one on the map here. I know there's a couple more that have popped up under trees over here. One of the biggest stones we found is actually on the other side of the fence to the polissoir. Not there, sorry, it's here. So again, we're sort of questioning, what's happened just then? Sorry about that. It's just random, it's just reset itself. So we're archaeologically, there's all sorts of interesting things to find. And we're very much sort of in the middle of that process at the moment.
Can I just ask about the boundary of the survey?
Yeah.
The green boundary that you show, that's the National Nature Reserve?
Yes.
It is. So you're constrained by that at the moment, but are you, well, I'd say constrained. The mapping seems to be within that. The area to the southwest, old maps show stones because that's a continuation of the valley. Are you looking at that, which I assume is private land?
So I have strayed slightly onto land that's outside of our official area. We have also, so we've got funding to look within this landscape and within the boundaries and the permissions that we've got by Natural England. We ran an online digital survey, was it last year, the year before, where basically we got people to look at the old Ordnance Survey maps and to highlight for us where all the stones are, where they're written on those maps. And we can't do it at the moment just because of timing and funding and everything, but at some point we'd like to further ground truth a lot of those. And to see, so I think there are other Sarsen stone, there's another natural train. Possibly there's something going on with the route of the A35 anyway. There's quite a lot of prehistoric monuments along that route that haven't really been highlighted. There's a couple of Sarsen stones in barrows on the hills at the top of the ridgeway just to the south of the A35. So I'd love to go and investigate that further in more detail at some point when we get the chance. It's amazing to how we've got so many ideas, and archaeology just seems to raise more questions than we ever answer. Yeah, the more we do, the more we want to do, but we always have to remember that, as Anne reminds me, Hayley, we can't have mission creep. So I'm very good at finding something exciting and going off down a rabbit hole and then realizing that I've forgotten my original objective. Yes. So, oh, excuse me. So yes, that we are constrained by our modern boundaries. In prehistory, they absolutely weren't constrained by those boundaries at all, and we really want to bear that in mind when we're doing this research. We've also looked at the fields up on Tennant's Hill, the fields owned by Gorwell Farm and by the Lower Kingston Russell Farm, but there's quite a bit of landscape in sort of joining up between the two, which we'd love to look at some point. And I'd love to go east of the Valley of Stones as well. However, they're all different landlords or landowners and different farmers, particularly in the Little Breedy area. It's a bit complicated at the moment. So we're just doing things one step at a time, basically. So I hope that sort of makes sense. And I hope I actually answered your question there, Ian. I'm very good at kind of going off on tangents. Are there any other questions before I move on to, how we actually do this data collection? Right, in that case, I will. Does anybody want to take a quick toilet break or a quick leg stretch? Are we good to keep going? All right, I'll share my screen again then. And we're not doing very careful. So, data collection. I'm just going to go over a few practical things first that it's important to remind you of. You all seem like you got your head screwed on, but it is important to when you head out to make sure someone knows where you're going and when to expect your return if you're working alone. Now, some of our volunteers prefer to head out by themselves. That's not compulsory. We set this survey up so that you can go and do it in your own time if you want. Sometimes that suits people. They just pop over of an afternoon when the weather's good. But we're also having some group recording sessions as well, so you can come out for our field days if you want. But if you're going out by yourself, you're out in the countryside, sort of sensible rules apply. Just let someone know where you're going. You can even just text me and let me know you're going if you want, and then let me know when you're coming back. I don't mind. But just sort of, it's a good sort of safety principle. I put here, do be aware of potential hazards, and then listed the main hazards really. So the weather in the Valley of Stones doesn't always seem to be the same as it is outside of the valley. It can be wet, it can be cold, you can get the mists coming in. So wear appropriate clothing and footwear. There are lots of trip hazards, including Sarsen stones hidden under the grass. You get the old bramble trailing across, that sort of thing. Follow the countryside code. There are livestock in the fields. So far, apparently at the moment there are quite a lot of cows in the main field we're working in. If you don't like cows, let me know and I will find you some stones that are not in that field. No one has said they have any. The biggest issues they have with the cows is the cows just being curious and not moving out of the way. So you go to survey your stone and find that there's a cow standing over it. You can't do anything about it. No one's had any issues with them, but I probably don't recommend taking dogs at the moment, just because you never quite know how that interaction is going to go. And yes, if you are particularly concerned, let me know and I'll find you an area where I think there aren't cows, but of course the farmer moves them around and I can't always tell exactly when he's moving them because he doesn't tell me. So yeah, usual countryside code, and don't leave litter, etc. Close all the gates. We absolutely do not want to damage the stones. We're not going to dig around them. We're not going to poke things into the ground. We're not going to peel lichen or mosses off. We really want, we're respectful of the stones and of the lichens and mosses that are on them, because they're just as important as the archaeology. If you can't answer the question because there's too much wildlife in the way, or plant life or whatever, just write that down. That's fine. As archaeologists, we're not even allowed to put tent pegs in the ground without getting permission in Scheduled Monument. So up on Tennant's Hill, part of our method was to use a peg or something to try and guess how big the stone was. We can't do that here, so we're very much only interested in what we can see. We're not going to break flakes of the stone off. If you're not sure about the geological structure, that's fine. Just write that down. Yeah, don't disturb the mosses or lichens. There's lots of gates in the Valley of Stones to get around, lots of footpaths. So don't climb fences or take other unnecessary risks. I think that's all fairly self-explanatory. So the survey we're doing is taking place in the Valley of Stones. I am giving everyone an area of their own to survey. At the moment, we're mostly working in a fairly sort of densely packed area. And we're finding that I've put here that each survey area is expected to take around 4 hours. It is taking people longer than that, partly because it takes ages to find where your stones are in the first place, and partly because people are finding extra stones all the time. So if you go and you've only got a few hours, and you only get a few stones surveyed and you never want to go back again, that's fine. Just let me know what you have done. One thing I will say is, yes, daylight hours are reduced at this time of year. Slowly, we are seeing the daylight come back, but don't bother going out at 3:30, because by the time you've got where you are, you'll start to struggle to see your stones, I think. So I've emailed all of you the survey pack. I'm very happy to post that as well. Or if you come out on one of the field days, I can give it to you. I'll talk to you more about that in a minute. You will need to provide, when you go out, a pen. I'm very happy for you to write your sheets with pencil when you're out there, particularly if it's pouring with rain. But we can't archive anything with pencil on it, because you just don't see the pencil. So we need all the forms filled in with a black biro or ballpoint pen. You'll need to use a tape measure for measuring the size of the stones, a camera or a camera phone, and a clipboard is obviously helpful. Again, if you struggle with any of those things, let me know, and we've got things we can share or ways to work around. Just don't have enough clipboards for everyone to have one. And even if your phone camera doesn't work, we can work around that. It's not a problem. So this is what the data collection sheet looks like. This is a standardized form we're using across everything. And the purpose for that is so that this data set is uniform. Everything that is recorded gets entered into a big spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet has drop-down boxes so that everything can be categorized, which makes it much, much easier to analyze the data later on. Some of this information we can fill in later, particularly the grid coordinates. Don't try and work those out in the field. It'll take you forever. It'll be much easier for me to do that from the desk using my computer once we've got all the mapping sorted.
Would it be possible for us to get access to the spreadsheet? It might be easier just to put it in electronically on a phone or tablet and record it and then transcribe it.
Absolutely. So I can give you the spreadsheet, but the archive that we're going to have at the end of this, and this is just the way archaeologists do things, we need to have a paper copy of every record, a digital sort of scanned PDF of every record, and then that spreadsheet as well, so that and then the photo for each record too. So I'll go into that detail in a minute. But yes, for those of you that are interested in spreadsheets and like that sort of thing, I personally think it can be really helpful to see sort of how you're doing things and why you're doing things and the constraints you're working under. But there's no pressure to do that, because some people are really put off by spreadsheets, and that's fine. The one thing I will say is try not to leave blank spaces.
Who doesn't love a spreadsheet, for heaven's sake?
Sorry, can you say that again, Mel?
Just said, who doesn't love a spreadsheet, for heaven's sake?
Well, you know, everyone's different. So what was I saying? Oh yes, but remember, when you first get out there, you will probably feel very unconfident. You will be unsure of the decisions that you're making, and you'll be wanting to put lots of question marks on things. We can't put a question mark into that spreadsheet. So you can see here on this example, where's my thingy gone? Where's my mouse gone? They circled domed here, and they put a question mark beside it. When I upload this example into the spreadsheet, I cannot, it will just become a domed type of stone. And then I'll, at the end of the project, I'll be able to say, we had, I don't know, 342 domed stones, for example. You are the person on the ground. The first couple you'll feel unconfident about. As you do more and more, you'll start to compare the stones to each other, and it will all sort of start to become a bit more obvious. You'll start to become more comfortable with it. There is nothing wrong with going back and looking over some of your, you know, the first sheets that you do, if you want to make changes as you realize you were sort of misunderstanding something, or things just didn't quite, you know, you've changed your opinions basically. Right. So I filled in the first couple of boxes. The project code is a Valley of Stones. This example has got 24 on it. We're now in Valley of Stones 25, which I know is a bit odd because we've just tipped over into 2026, but we're still working under the project code from last year. And the project name is the Valley of Stones Sarsen Survey. So every record sheet has a whole series of numbers that will allow, in theory, anyone, if they found this piece of paper fluttering down the street, to be able to track down exactly which stone it is, you know, it is recording. That starts with the project code, and the project name, the field number. We've got maps that have got the field numbers on them. And then we've got these two boxes which look very similar. We've got an assigned number and a stone number. If I'm just going to, this is what the maps sort of look like that I'll give you. This is how I break down the different areas. So we'll have a different volunteer doing area AS 40, which are these purple ones, to doing AS 41. And the person doing AS 41 will annotate their map to say this is stone 1, stone 2, stone 3, stone 4, stone 5, etc. It doesn't matter which stone you do which first, but I need you to annotate on the map numbers. And then you will put that number up in here. So you will have something like AS forgotten what I was sometimes using. AS40/1. That will be your stone number for that stone. AS. God, what's wrong with my brain? AS40/2. Now, this is just while I'm here. There's an interesting example. I suspect this stone here could well be actually 2 stones. Can you sort of see the shape of it? It could be that there's a divot in it and there's a bit of grass growing through here, which is why it was drawn like this. But it wouldn't surprise me if that was actually 2 stones. And in that case, you could just label that stone 1, that stone 2, draw a little line down it, and I would probably know what you meant. This box up here, where it says stone number, if you remember, in an ideal world, you'll leave that blank. Because when we've got this entire data set completed, I will have to go through and give every stone its own number so that everything is sort of sequential, which is a job that I'm not particularly looking forward to. But there we go, that's the plan. So as long as you write on your map the numbers, and then each recording form has its own set of, has the number of that stone, I will then be able to reference everything up. And I can then put that spreadsheet into our mapping software. And eventually I can then, in the mapping software, click on that stone and bring up all the data that you recorded via that spreadsheet. That's the dream. Did you want to say something, Richard?
Yeah, just to clarify that. So when we're doing this, we take this high resolution coloured map of stones out into the field and we annotate it as we do each stone in turn and put the number. And then presumably we have to return that annotated map to you or a PDF photograph of it. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. So towards the end of this workshop, I'll go through how you give all the data back to me.
Okay, that's good. Because I was puzzling yesterday as to how you're going to know, but annotating the map was the obvious way of doing it. So that's good to know.
Yeah, it's amazing. Sometimes we use the most high-tech methods, and actually sometimes the best way is just to use pen and paper. And if you join me out on site at some point, or you come out for one of the days, I can help you start with that as well. But when you do send me the data, the first thing I always look for is that map there? Because if that map isn't there, I don't know where to start. So
yeah, the map isn't on the instructions of what to send back.
No. So if you are all keen to join, I can then email you across a map that hasn't been done yet, because basically we've got I've got over 100 different areas at the moment. And so I've just sort of got this rolling program, and as people do one map, finish one area, I will then send them another one to do. But I didn't want to overload you with absolutely everything before you'd even decided whether you wanted to come out in the field with us or not.
No, I think, sorry, perhaps I haven't made myself clear. When it says send us your digital records, the annotated map, there's the recording form to send back, the Excel file, if completed, any relevant photographs. No, there's no mention of the annotated map needed to be sent back to you.
So that's my error.
Added to that list. Yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out. I'm going to make a note of that. No one else has ever pointed that out to me. And to be honest with you, most people seem to remember to send me the maps anyway. I guess when you're out in the field and recording, it becomes obvious that I need that. But I will change those instructions for future use.
Yeah.
Sorry, just give me a second to write that down. It's interesting that no one else has spotted that over the last 2 years.
We haven't been out yet, but I've been through all the forms, so it kind of that was one of our queries.
I'm very impressed. You've done all this morning as well. I didn't expect you to even have a chance to look at them this morning. So, right. So, what was the point of this slide? Oh yeah, just to show you that the areas that we started in this year, and we're slowly working our way along. I think actually by the time you guys, if I send you the maps this afternoon or whenever, you're probably going to be working a little bit more down here at the moment. But what I've also found has happened is we get some people who are super keen. They go out and they put loads of time into it, and they're slowly working their way through. Some people have done 50 stones, 60 stones, you know, they're getting through them really quite quickly. Other people are just, you know, they came out with us at the very beginning, and have only managed to do 5 or 10. So everybody's different, but it means the pace of working can be a bit tricky. And if you head out on Sarsen Sundays, which I'll talk to you about again later in a bit, the idea then is that they'll, you know, it's just sort of volunteers are going out to support each other. But you may well find that volunteers are actually working in quite different places in the landscape, depending on just what areas they've been allocated. So this is an example of the geology maps. These are not the easiest of maps to understand. If you struggle with them, leave it blank. It's another example of where it will be much easier for me to extract that information at the end digitally, if it's unclear.
Yeah, that's
and it can be unclear for 2 reasons. Either one, you can't get your head around the map, which is understandable, or 2, because you might be on a boundary. And because the scale isn't particularly great, you might not be able to make that decision. So that's fine, and that's just is what it is. Right, moving down the form. I'm just gonna get my paper copy out here.
Can wait till the end. Okay.
Visibility. So this is how much of the stone can you see? Sometimes you will find a stone and you know it's a stone, but you can't see any of it. That's fine. Please just write that down. So the options you've got are, you know, is it fully exposed in plan? So when you look down on it, can you see every, you know, all the edges, or not? Or is it fully exposed in section? That's a bit more relevant for things that are sort of going up a hill. Most of them are partially exposed in one way or another. And then we're recording the visible length, width, and depth. So just do your best with that one. And then it says on this slide, so annotate measurements if part of the stone continues and is not visible. That's on the back where we'll get you to do a sketch. So if you could show us on there where the grass is over and where you think the stone continues, that's just helpful for later on. Richard, did you have a question for me?
Yeah, you said we're not, and rightly so, I suppose, we don't disturb anything as part of this survey. So if you come across a lump in the field, which is clearly a lump of something, but it's completely covered, do you want us to record that or not?
So
the assumption.
yes, I think so. Even if you just say, we've come across this thing, we don't know what it is. I can't think of any examples where people, I think everyone so far has just assumed that something is a stone. But some people have just said, you know, we can tell it's a stone because or they think it's a stone because it's covered in moss, and they've measured the extent of the moss and stopped at where the grass is, for example, and that's how they've sort of guessed the extent of the stone. One thing you might find that you need to do, and it's okay to do, is sort of where the grass can be quite long, is bend the grass down. You know, and you can sort of feel with your fingers and have a guess.
So do we fill the form in? It kind of suggests that the assumption is it's a sarsen. If it's something hard and covered in vegetation.
Could it be anything else?
Could it be anything else? Yes.
We haven't come across anything else yet. If you think it's something else, then please let us know. There have also been examples where we found a couple of things that Historic England must have drawn on the map, and they just didn't seem to exist. And either it's a stone that's gone missing, which seems to be unlikely, or maybe there was a bird sat on the ground when the when the aerial photographs were taken or something, and that couldn't be distinguished from a stone. Just make a note and say it's it's not here or it's missing, and we can always then go back and investigate what that could be. But that has not happened very often.
Okay.
Yeah. Mel, did you have a question?
Yeah, I appreciate that we're not to disturb mosses and lichens and grasses and whatnot, but probably just a very thin pointed implement would determine whether it was just a mound of earth or a stone underneath without disturbing or destroying anything.
It would do, but as archaeologists, we're not allowed to do that because it's a scheduled monument. It is an immense source of frustration, shall we say, that for archaeologists to do anything in a scheduled area, we have to ask permission. And we're not even allowed to go and do a geophysical survey without getting permission first. And basically all that involves is walking across the landscape, recording data, completely non-obtrusively, and putting a few pegs in the ground. And we're just not allowed. So I cannot tell you that that is a good idea, I'm afraid. But when you're out there, you'll work it out. And this is all an estimate. And actually, it's not going to surprise me at all if Natural England use some of this data to consider their management approaches to the ground. And I know that at points they do clear back scrub. At points they do clear back the grass and they do clear back the moss. So what we're recording here is very much a snapshot in time. If we'd done it 5 years ago, we'd probably get quite different sizes to if we do it now or, in 5 years' time. But what we're doing is like a snapshot across the landscape, all in one go, where we can. All right. Moving on. Orientation. Stones will be horizontal, oblique, horizontal or oblique. And basically, by horizontal, we mean, are they lying flat to the ground? Now, in places, obviously, the stones might be on a bit of a slope. That is still, if the ground's on a slope and the stone's on a slope, that's still horizontal. It becomes oblique when it looks like someone's picked up the stone and maybe stuck its nose in the ground. And that is one particularly helpful pointer towards whether a stone has had any people interference, anyone's done anything with it at any point. And we've definitely been coming across stones that look like they've been tipped, look like they've been turned over, like they've been moved around. So that's really helpful. And if you can stick in an angle, that's great. Some of them are just completely vertical. Then we're looking at shape. I'm sorry these photos are such poor examples. We're not finding very many tabular sarsens. They are there, but that's where you've got roughly sort of parallel top and bottom. There's quite a lot of rounded ones out there, where the edges are quite worn. And there are a few that are domed, which are kind of similar to tabular. So one bit might be flat, but then the other bit's quite raised. And then you get these completely irregular shapes. A lot of them are quite irregular. This one down here, this is actually an example from the Kingston Russell Stone Circle, and we've nicknamed it the Turtle Stone. So when you're filling in your sheets, I absolutely don't mind if you want to give your stones nicknames to help you understand or interpret them. We've had dolphin stones, we've had all sorts of things. And there was one example where there was some issue with the mapping or something, and I went back to try and work out which stone it was. And the only reason I could work it out was because they described it as a dolphin and they'd labelled the dolphin fin. And that was actually a really helpful way to be able to go back and track down that stone. So it's not a scientific way of doing things, but it can still be helpful. And then we're going to record the types of sarsen. So this is very much about just circling the yes and no answers. And if you just work your way through those questions, this is, as you work your way through the questions, you'll start to learn a bit more about what they mean and how they compare to each other. In the pack I gave you, and I can print you these out, is a guide size to the inclusions, but it won't take you very long to realise which ones are sort of, what the sand looks like, what the silts look like, and it's really obvious when there are flint pebbles there. And then some stones, we very much get these sort of bands. Here we go. So these bands of the conglomerate mixed with the saccharoid. So you can see here, this must have been where the river had just deposited loads of flinty stones, and then it slowed down a bit in its pace and was depositing some much finer grain, and then picked up again up here. So so that is an example of D, anyway, a banded or mixed composition sarsen. Now, I did skip over this. Looking at the shattered flint pebbles, that's where they've just been exposed to the elements, and they just shatter. And then there's also, some of them have got quite a lot of quartz in the matrix. And I also found out the other day that when you go out and it's been quite wet and the sun's shining, they can look really sparkly and really pretty. So just to keep ploughing through, on the back of the form is a box for evidence of use. So is there any way in which you can see how the stone has been used? Are there any straight edges where it looks like the stone has been split? If you start with the principle that a sarsen stone is usually completely irregular or rounded, if there's a straight edge, it probably means it's been split. If it's been turned on its end, yes, someone's been interested in it at some point in the past. Sometimes there are holes where they've been chiseling out to put explosives in, to blast them apart, those sorts of things. And the middle box on the back is archaeological features and interpretation. So you probably won't often put anything in that box. You can just write none. But it's things like the example here, it's in the side of a quarry pit. Or it is, there's some features on site where the stones have been arranged into a circle. There's one that we think is a prehistoric roundhouse. So you would just make a note that it is one of those stones as part of that feature. You might not be able to tell that, to be honest with you, when you're out there looking at the individual stones. Another thing to look out for is whether they're in the sides of, say, a bank, one of those field boundaries I was talking about. And then the sketch of the stone. So this does not need to be a work of art. It needs to be something that just gives a rough idea as to what the stone looks like. So if we want to go back and track it down, we can, basically. So thinking about the evidence of use, these are some examples. You can see this one on the left-hand side, the really straight edge here, that's been split there. and then a flake has been taken off at this corner here. Probably what happened to this stone is one of the first things they will do is come and take the flake off the corner, so they can actually see the quality of the stone before they decide whether they want to split it and take it away or not. These are the sorts of patterns you get in flake removal when they shape the stones for buildings. And then this one over here, we've not got anything quite as clear as this in the Valley of Stones at the moment, but you can see these little circular features here, where they've been driving in wedges. And they also use chisels. There are some examples in the valley where they have used a chisel to make a mostly circular hole that they then fill with explosives and split the stone apart. Now, if you come out with me or with the other volunteers, I mean, I could show you hundreds of photos of these types of stones, but it's probably easiest to show you in the field the sorts of things you're looking for. Otherwise, you will start to notice it yourself. It's amazing once you start to actually pay attention to these things, how your eye sort of starts to learn what's natural and what's not. I don't think you're going to find any gateposts. And if you find another polissoir, that would be amazing. We have been finding some examples of where the stones look like they've been polished, possibly by being used as a cow scratching post. But we've also found some stones that look like they've been polished by a cow or a sheep or something, but that must have been moved after that had happened. Because they look like they've been polished, but they're quite sort of up close to another stone. So there's some work to do on the interpretation of those. And it could be that they've just been polished by medieval sheep rather than modern ones. Anything else you want to add on, anything useful, please do. If you want to, I don't know, if you can draw on your sketch where the moss is. Some of the stones have sort of got trees half over them and brambles and things. You can just make a note of where they are. If there are any, some of the stones have sort of natural hollows and divots, you can put those on. But the thing to remember is it doesn't have to be a work of art. And you can do it in pencil until you're happy with it and then go over it in pen, ready for our archives. That's fine. I've put at the bottom here, if you find a stone that's not on your map, please provide an additional drawing. Actually, you can just scribble it on the annotated map. Again, it doesn't have to be an exact drawing of the stone, but as long as it's roughly in location with the others, and you've told me whether I'm looking for a stone that's 20 centimeters wide or 150 centimeters wide, I should be able to track it down and work it out. Oh, and then photos. Right. Okay, before I go on to photos, then a couple of questions. Richard.
Yeah. I think the other chap was in first. He's got number 1 against him.
Oh, I think that might have been up for a while. Mel, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
I'm sorry, no, I didn't turn my hand off.
I'm going to ask one quick question before Mel, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Is there a lower size threshold to the stones that you want us to record? So if we find one biggish stone surrounded by 30 very small ones, do we record 31 stones?
Yes. We are not recording stones that are not fixed in the ground. So there have been a couple of examples where it looks like, I don't know, a cow has kicked something up and broken something. We did have a limit to the size stone we were recording. I cannot currently remember what it was. I've just had a complete mind blank.
I think it was 25 centimeters from the previous recording that we watched. It
okay.
because that query came up on that call as well. I think it was 25.
Mostly what's important is we're only interested in the stones that have been there for a significant time. Yeah, I have seen a couple of volunteers have sent me some slightly odd photos where it looks like the stones have just appeared, and I think they're not even, I don't think they've even been Sarsen stones. I think they've been from slightly further up the valley sides where there's like a water drinking trough, and I think the cattle have sort of, I think maybe even the farmer has put some hardcore down or something. Like, yeah, I haven't actually been out to investigate those fully yet, but they don't. You are probably best off at judging whether it's a useful thing to know or not. If it's drawn on your annotated map and you think, oh, this is tiny, just make a note of that. And it may well be that over time, the grasses and mosses have crept over. So when the map was recorded, the stone was bigger. And in that instance, actually, we probably are interested in the detail of that one. But yeah, if it's something that looks like it's loose, then we're not. But yeah, don't waste your time doing anything too tiny.
Okay, thanks.
It's a good question.
Can I ask about the explosive charge holes which are illustrated? I know quite a lot of the Sarsens have got natural root fissures. I just wondered how you distinguish between what is clearly an imposed explosive charge hole and a natural fissure.
So it's to do with regularity. So the explosive charge holes, they use a chisel to make them, and what they do is they basically put the chisel on the stone, bash it, turn it, bash it, turn it, bash it, and that has the effect of producing a hole that's not quite circular but not quite triangular either, but it still looks very regular and very uniform, and the sides are very smooth and very vertical. So if you just run your finger inside it, you can usually feel how smooth it is. And if you look on this example on the screen, on the left-hand side with the one labeled flake removal, you can see these little sort of holes all over the place. They're not regular. Even just looking on the screen to me now, they all look like this. I mean, they're on slightly odd angles. You'd expect the shafts for explosives to be vertical. And if you were to run your finger in those, you'd probably find that because they've been caused, I think these are partly caused by water, but they're also partly caused by the way that the plants and organic matter were around when the stones were formed. But it means that there's nothing uniform about them, and often you put your finger inside and you realise that it undercuts. No person is ever going to bother making a hole in the stone like this, that's sort of undercutting itself, or is too lumpy and bumpy inside. So if we meet out on site at some point, I can show you them in the flesh. They're much easier to sort of see and understand when you're out there.
So they were just physically blowing the stones apart with a small charge. Is that what these?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So there were two methods in which they would use. They would use wedges. Where you put a series of wedges along a line, and that was sort of the earlier method, and that's the method that you use if you want to use and extract the stone for a building. You want it regularly shaped and sized. Later on, they became a little bit less precise in what they were doing, and especially when they wanted the Sarsen, they'd use it as hardcore for road building or things like that.
Yeah.
So they didn't really care too much as to the aesthetics. And in both these examples, it's something else to look for on the ground, is they would sort of dig a little trench around the stone and free it from the earth. And then they had to extract sarsen actually required, because it's such a hard stone, it was a specialist skill. And they would have someone come along and say, right, this is the right type of stone, we're going to put the charge in here, and it will predictably split along these lines. So they sort of dig the earth out around it, and then make these holes and blow it apart, and then it would, like you can see in this photo here, it's like, it's split into some fairly usable chunks.
Okay.
What we have also spotted out on site, and this is something else to watch out for when you're walking around, you trip over them, is there are some obvious holes in the ground where the stones look like they've been taken out from. Again, we're not making any attempt, deliberate or what's the word, we're not asking people to record those at the moment, but if you do see something like that you think is obvious and of interest, if you could highlight it in some way, just by scribbling it on your map or something, it's always useful and interesting to know that. Yeah. Any other questions at this stage? I think we are getting to the end.
Query. Oh, I had a query about the areas that you give out for survey. So if we arrive on site and we find cows sitting all over the stones that we've been allocated, we've made that trip out, we've got the time to do another area. How do we get hold of the data or the maps for an additional area, and how do we know that that hasn't been already recorded?
Yeah, that's tricky. If you are worried about cows, and I'll be honest, it was only a couple of weeks ago that the farmer put them into the field. What I can do is I can just give you an area where I think they're not, or I can actually allocate you 2 different areas at opposite ends of the field, so that then you can take your pick. Or I can give you one in one field and one in another, one in one field and one in another field, so that hopefully you've got different options to pick from. If you go out on a Sarsen Sunday, some of the volunteers have got a whole bunch of maps with them. I've just given them, I think I gave them like 20 different ones to work their way through. So they're sort of sharing them and have been, they can give you a different area. I think the best thing to do is I'll give you multiple maps so that you can pick what you want.
Yes.
I think that would be best, because we had a slightly unusual scenario. We were out at the Valley of Stones one summer, and there was a chap there who you wouldn't want to approach, unfortunately, in the valley. It does attract sort of unusual characters, shall we say. So if you're on your own, or even as a pair, we left the area.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That's the first example I've had of anyone encountering someone or an uncomfortable situation. I mean, it's good to know about.
So just to be aware.
Yeah, that's good. So yeah, just
it might not be just cows.
no, that's a shame. Yeah, again, that's why I'm heading out tomorrow, and there's another couple of dates I've got in the diary when I'll be out there. I haven't actually had a chance to check through the forms, but the other thing is we've got a very active WhatsApp group, where people just put and they say, I'm heading out today, do you want to come along as well? Or anyone's welcome to join me. So if you'd prefer to go out with more company, whether that's to help you, give you confidence filling in the forms, or whether it's because you want some, to know that there's someone else normal and decent out there, then
so we need to be armed with not enough forms, not just for the patch that we've been allocated, but possibly an additional area, because it's a good hour's drive for us to get out to the site, so we wouldn't want to waste that trip if we couldn't do them.
I will make sure you're well prepared. So anyway, if I finish working my way through the the last couple of slides,
Mm-hmm.
we can then chat about, because I don't know whether Ian and Mel want to head out as part of the group. You can let me know whether you want things posting to you or whether you want to meet me out there, or we can talk about those things in a minute. So yes, the last little bit is about getting me the forms. Some people find this really straightforward and easy. For some people, it's really not. And I'm very happy to take you through it individually at the appropriate time. If I know if I go into too much detail now, you're going to go out into the field, you'll be all excited and doing it. Hopefully you'll come home and realize or completely forget that we've talked our way through all of this. But what we do need is a digital scan of each form, one PDF per stone, so the front and back as a PDF, and then save that file name with your area and stone name as part of the file name, so that what I've got is I've got a database of each area, of each, and each area's got its own folder, each stone has got its own folder, and then I can search that database, and it makes it much easier for me to connect that database with the mapping, basically. So we've recommended Genius Scan as an app on your phone if you don't have any other way of scanning things. It's quite good at it just kind of cuts out all the edges for you, if that works. This is an example of the spreadsheet I was talking about earlier. So you can see here how very much, something is either partially exposed. Most things, that one's fully exposed. Things are either small or large. It's rounded or irregular, or tabular. There's not much in between. There's no rooms for question marks, I'm afraid. And if you want, I can send you that spreadsheet if you're interested. I've also got a couple of volunteers who don't like going out into the field, but they enjoy spreadsheets and they enjoy data entry. So if you don't want to do that side of things, that's fine. Other people are very keen to do it. So, we're one big team here, and we all try and do the bits that we enjoy. And I somehow try and coordinate it all, which is the bit that I enjoy. And then often the most complicated bit is photographs. Trying to extract photographs off of phones isn't the easiest thing to do. If you can't relabel your file name to give it the same, to associate it with your stone, because that can be a real pain on phones, write down the photo number that your phone automatically gives the photo on the bottom of your recording sheet, and I can then work that out later on, as long as there is some way in which I can cross-reference the two. Some people have been writing on a piece of paper the stone numbers and putting that in the photograph. They prefer, that's the easiest way for them to do it. That's also fine. I find that really hard because the bits of paper seem to blow around every time I go out there, but that's up to work out the best way that works for you. Ian, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, there you go. I'm trying to turn the volume on. Yeah, I proposed to get with Jeff on some of these surveys. To be honest, I'm getting a bit snowblind with this also. What is the app you wanted? It's Genius Scan.
So that's a suggestion.
There's two on
Jeff,
here. There's Genius, there's PDF Scanner and Genius Scan PDF. Which one would it be, do you think?
So Genius Scan.
With the orange logo.
Yes, I can't. Turns out it's been so long since I think it's an orange logo. Jeff is a perfect example of somebody who doesn't like doing the technology bits. And if you really struggle with it all, I'm very happy to meet at some point in a pub with a computer, and you can just give it to me that way. But James, I think it's got an orange. I think it's got an orange logo.
Yeah, I'll load that. I find it much easier to actually do it to learn rather than. So
well,
I'm happy if you could send the information across and either go with you or do it with Jeff as well. So he was.
Well, Jeff's he's great. He knows what he's doing out in the field. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm very happy to do is when you get to the stage of wanting to give me your data, is to just go over this again with you. I've done that with quite a few people. Because if it takes you a month to record your stones, I mean, you've forgotten all details of this, and it seems to be no matter what I write down, there'll be some complication with technology. The app will change the way that they do things.
So where is this pack then? The pack of information?
I thought I emailed it to you last week or something. I'll email it to you again.
Thank you.
I can also print it out for you.
That'd be even better.
In fact, are you planning? When are you planning on heading out into the field? Do you think? I'll answer that question in a second when I bring up the dates. Because I can either post it to you in advance, or I can meet you out there and give it to you.
Yeah, possibly one day this week.
Okay, let me just think on that then.
Or next week. Yeah, I'll liaise with you direct, shall I?
Yeah. But so the next couple of the next slide, I've got the dates that I'm heading out there, so we can look at that.
Okay.
And the last thing to say is that I prefer it if you can use WeTransfer to send the photos. If you try and attach photos to emails, often the photos are so large it completely crashes your email system and mine.
So WeTransfer another app, is it?
I do it through a website. They probably have an app. Again, we can go over that at the right moment in time. Yeah. But it's just rather than, I mean, some people, there are all sorts of different ways of transferring large files. But WeTransfer is the easiest one for me to use because all I need to do is press I download it and all the files download in one go, as opposed to all the other. We could have a Google Drive or all sorts of things, but this seems to be the easiest way to do it.